So let's check this one now too. We need to talk about Ubisoft situation by Beller News. Give him a subscribe and a like if you like the video too.
When we published this video, Ubisoft stock had absolutely crashed. It was trading just shy of €10. Today, it's trading for €13.69. That still is pretty tiny. It's peanuts compared to their all-time high, but what it is a 35% increase. If you bought it cheap, you could stand to gain. But the reason why is in fact the main theory that we put
how much they have their price.
It's why even though this stock has increased less,
how much is their stock price?
Some could make absolute vast millions, and it's all down to the one thing that their CEO has waged war against for a decade, and his new plan, it seems, to get around it. To understand the motives, to understand who they are and what Ubisoft is. Yves Guillemot is Ubisoft's CEO. Born in 1960 to parents running a farming supplies business, he worked in it along with his brothers, and they did things like accounts, shipping, delivery. They gained vital skills doing this. So it will fall more,
I think, at the moment. It will fall more with the chaos of the acquisition by Tencent, I think.
It dipped a little bit on the farming side, they diversified. The older brother added CDs to the mix, then computers and even games. Games did so well that they had to expand beyond their mail order business to actually supplying retail stores. This was going well, and it was a good fit because the brothers themselves liked playing Japanese arcade games. So, after getting his education and seeing how fast games grew, even his brothers decided to start a company. His father Gerard suggested Ubi, and with that, Ubisoft was founded. The year is 1986. Ubisoft begins as a family business, and for years, Yves and his brothers, the Guillemots, they have controlled the company.
I played the first Prince of Persia. I don't think it was called even that. I don't remember what it was called. The 2D one, like back in the 90s. I think I played all of their games since the 90s, which is crazy.
But over the last decade, they have been at war to keep it that way. With that in mind, we've got to review what has just happened to their games, and after that, we'll dive into the pretty crazy situation, why their stock has surged, and how this could be the Guillemot & Co.'s masterstroke to avoid what would, for them, be a very bad outcome. With everything going on, Ubisoft is a leaky ship, and because of that, people spoke to Insider Gaming. Tom Henderson, who runs the site, has a pretty long history of Ubisoft leaks. So here's the things that have been reported. 1. Staff spent months internally pushing for a delay to this game, clearly thinking it was not ready under any circumstances. 2. Nearly every team at Ubisoft for years has been pushing for day one Steam launches. Point 3 then.
Prince of Persia, Two Thrones, and Sound of Time,
tweaks made Assassin's Creed Shadows risked damaging the game, and it turns out this is a lesson that they learned from Outlaws, where loads of them I don't play Warrior Routine on the launch of Outlaws were because of the unintended consequences of last-minute design tweaks. Certainly, if some of the early stealth stuff just felt weird, not balanced, not really intended, apparently it was that, and the same should go for plenty of other bugs as well. 4th, sources suggest that historical consultants actually came onto the project later than normal, and that the historical approval process suffered from miscommunications and deadline-related cut corners. That is quite bad, because if historical review deems that something needs to be changed, that means changing an asset, changing text, maybe even re-recording a line of dialogue. And if the game is
when you change an asset, you have to change other assets. Sometimes, I think, I'm not a dev, but if you change an asset that is related to another one, you cut lots of the game. They should continue the series and how the new pop. I think so.
Shipping in English, that would be fine. Games like this do not only ship in English. Everything needs localization and QA.
So I don't know how they made the new Prince of Persia, but I think they should try to continue the series in some way, shape or form.
Just takes time. And then finally, as pertains to Shadows, there's apparently a co-op mode that is currently in development. But that's in fact not all that's going on with Assassin's Creed. First, Mirage is getting a Steam release this month, and that is a game that sold shockingly well in its initial run.
Look at the
It
trailer.
didn't make much of a splash, but it's Assassin's Creed. There are millions of consoles out there.
It's not the remake one, no?
Produce sales numbers. Now, on top of all of that, Insider Gaming sources say that Ubisoft plan 10 Assassin's Creed games within 5
Co-op, I think co-op it can be a good idea. I don't know how people received it, but I encourage them for the creativity of it.
5 years, which sounds absolutely bonkers, but here's a rough breakdown. There's Jade, a mobile game that we know of. There's Hex, a single-player game that's coming after Shadows.
Oh, I don't know.
Recent rumors then suggest that there will be a Black Flag remake that is coming sooner rather than later. Going to some older leaks, actually from Insider Gaming, we see Invictus, Nebula...
I'm kind of happy for the Black Flag remake. I don't think it necessarily needed the graphics remake. It's still looking good. But I don't know if they add a lot, which I don't think they will, into the game. But if they did add a lot to it, yeah, it could be worth it.
Raid, Echoes, and another VR title. Now, big picture, Mirage did actually sell real well, and I expect it to do at least okay.
That's good.
It'll especially have done well, though, because it initially was a DLC for Valhalla, so it was never scoped, never costed to be a full Assassin's Creed game. So if you're ever wondering why the cinematics seem a little bit quicker and perhaps a little bit cheaper than past Assassin's Creeds, well, that's why it was supposed to be a DLC. Overall, then, I expect they will weave remasters, Mirage-sized games, Shadow-sized games, and multiplayer projects all together. It's an absurd amount of Assassin's Creed, but unlike the old days of back-to-back entries made in an identical mold that of course crashed and burned with Syndicate, you could say at least these will be differentiated between different flavors of single-player, multiplayer, and I suppose technically mobile counts. But I still do think it's very risky, because if you saturate one of your key brands, people will just care less. It'll feel a little bit less like an event.
Yeah, of course.
And funnily enough, that's happened to Star Wars. Outlaws then. Tom's sources told him that it sold 1 million copies in the first 30 days, which is bad, really bad. For comparison, Fallen Order sold 2.9 million units in its first month, Survivor sold 3.7 million, and Battlefront sold 3.7 million in week 1. Its Extremely Embattled sequel at least sold 1.33 million also in week 1. So these are absolutely brutal compared to Outlaws, but not the worst comparison. The worst comparison is Star Wars Squadrons. It was a low-budget, mid-price game from EA Motive that shifted 1.1 million copies digitally within its first month. Now, to be clear, these numbers are from a leak. They are not confirmed. They are not a part of something where, because you're a publicly traded company, there is a degree...
Yeah, and when there's like mid-budget games doing like bigger games or even better, that makes AAA companies want to go mobile-like, which is bad for the industry, I think.
Of, well, liability, if you like. If so, the idea that Outlaws actually missed the sales of Squadrons, that is brutal. Now, to be fair, since Squadrons, well, the Star Wars brand is in a bit of a worse spot. But still, it is clear that Outlaws underperformed. If these numbers are true, it's to an absolutely alarming level, but regardless, we know it underperformed. Ubisoft said so. They do, of course, have their plan to salvage it. That's the next development in today's story. Title Update 2 just dropped along with a roadmap, so there's going to be a third quality of life patch landing the 24th of October, and then a fourth patch that is focused on stealth and combat that coincides with the Steam launch, and of course also the expansion launch, which is on the 21st of November.
Well, I think if the game already did poorly, it's really hard to bring new people in, and especially when people were not so enthusiastic, we're not so hyped about this game because it's made by Ubisoft, like they were with CD Projekt Red. I gotta go, man, work time. Okay, later. Talk to you soon.
Some final tidbits before we get into the real juicy story.
See you soon.
And that is that key creatives are...
And yeah, I forgot what I was gonna say. Yeah, if I remember it, I talk about
Rabbids team, and the VP of
I'm getting old.
6 also left. Okay.
Oh, about the CD Projekt Red situation with Cyberpunk. At least there were people hyped of CD Projekt Red making Cyberpunk, and they didn't know they will fail, so they were hyped a lot. Not like the situation with Star Wars Outlaws, where people were not hyped and it made bad sales. I don't think Ubisoft can like reproduce what CD Projekt Red did with Cyberpunk, like an arc where they come back, and they come back with lots of players.
Said, you're now caught up to speed with the leaks, the rumors, the Ubisoft news. That means it's time for the Gilmo War. I must start,
especially where they are now in this situation that they need to sell the company. It's really hard to make a comeback story, so to speak.
For the headline, Tencent, Guillemot family said to consider buyout of Ubisoft. This was posted in Bloomberg. Rumors swirled, and along with those rumors, the stock surged. But the real story is a deeper one. Now, if true, this is Guillemot and Tencent solidifying control. For them, this could be a clean solution to an extremely messy problem, and that's because recently, AJ Invest, which are an investment firm, they started buying Ubisoft stock when it was really cheap. After that, and while they were increasing their position, came a scathing open letter. It absolutely slammed Ubisoft leadership for being too quarterly driven to the point where they were not properly exploiting their IP, and it also slammed them for bothering with smaller projects like Prince of Persia, Lost Crown. But most tellingly, they cite their experience investing in Activision Blizzard, and they are furious that the current leadership turned down private equity cash. Their idea...
I think they're in the situation right now where they need to experiment a lot, Ubisoft, to see what's working.
...would be that they should take on the cash, perhaps gut the company, maybe take it private,
and that makes it a little chaotic for the investors, of course.
...orient it in the direction of AJ Investments' thesis. For the Guillemot camp, though, this would be bad. This would be them losing control of the company. But of course, it's not just Yves Guillemot, a CEO of a company. No, this is a family business. It's one named by his father that he launched with his brothers. He does not want to lose it. And, well... this is not the first time he's had to fight. The Guillemots have a nemesis also located in France, and that nemesis is Vivendi. That's the very same Vivendi that ended up owning Blizzard Entertainment through the early 2000s. Now, they are a media conglomerate, and they're one that, kind of declared war on the Guillemot family. Their first target was Gameloft. Now, Gameloft was founded in 1999 by Michel Guillemot. It was another family business until rather suddenly it was not. Something fishy happened October 2015. Vivendi acquired 6.2% of Gameloft stock, but within a few days, that had increased to 10.2%. Alarm bells began to ring inside because this sure did look like a hostile takeover. And as months would tell, that's absolutely what it was. Within just a few months, Vivendi owned 30% of the company. The following February saw them announce their tender bid, which basically is that if you are going beyond a certain percentage of control and you want to get more, you've got to make an announcement, right? It's a legal thing. As a part of this, they asked existing shareholders to sell their stock to them. Gameloft's board, of course, the Guillemot board, strongly advised shareholders not to do this, but within just a few months, Vivendi turned enough shareholders for them to gain absolute control of the company. By the time all was said and done, Vivendi owned 95.94% of Gameloft. The Guillemots were out of the company that one of them founded. The thing is, when Vivendi bought those shares in Gameloft at the start,
that's interesting. I didn't know that.
They also picked up 10.4% of Ubisoft. This would increase, and within 11 months, they held 23%. At that point, they held more shares than the Guillemots, but they did not hold more voting power.
And Ubisoft bosses were forced out of the company because either they listened to Vivendi's family or they got out, so yeah, I understand.
That's because the voting power of the stock doubles
once you can understand that.
Held for more than 2
years. The competition.
Something that exists to protect the company from this sort of thing happening too quick. What this did do was put the Guillemots on the clock. As they could see it soon, Vivendi's voting power would double, and that would make a takeover, a hostile takeover, a serious possibility. Much happened over the next while, like a request to put Vivendi people on the board, which Yves did successfully fend off. Ultimately, in this story, Vivendi failed and a deal was made. With that deal, Vivendi sold all of their shares. They agreed not to buy any more shares for 5 years. Tencent purchased 5% of those shares. But where it's interesting is that years later, in 2022, Tencent went in deeper. They invested $300 million, not into Ubisoft, but into Guillemot Brothers Limited. That's the company that they used to hold the Ubisoft stock. And with this deal, Tencent owned 49.9% of the company, while the brothers had 50.1%, basically meaning that Tencent were a junior partner and absolutely were giving the Guillemots resources and backing them up. And with that, more than ever before, the Guillemot situation was secure. Changing it would take quite the crisis, which, as you know, is exactly what happened through 2024. Okay, to the present day. As we've covered, AJ wants to build a coalition of fellow investors and essentially overthrow Tencent and the Guillemos, but not just through buying shares. AJ actually believes that the arrangement with Tencent violates EU law that is designed to protect minority investors. This puts Team Guillemot in a tricky position. If they go private under AJ's plan, it would annihilate their control of the company they started. If they stayed public and just try to fend them off normally, that risks AJ turning shareholders against them. And even without a major shareholder revolt, it's always possible that AJ make headway with the EU and that ends up causing
I think for the bosses of Ubisoft is bad anyway they go from now on.
That's why going private on their own terms would make sense. The Guillemot-Tencent alliance would retain control of the company, they'd become free from quarterly report bullshit, which I'm sure they'd love.
The only way for them to escape this situation, I think, is experiment with some stuff, but it's really hard because they have a bad rep already. So yeah, people will not come with an open mind to their games anymore. So even if they experiment with new stuff in their games that works, it's really hard to attract the people to make the money and escape the situation.
And their investors would still get their payday, but that's not to say that it's risk-free. At worst, Tencent could just gobble them up, but I actually don't think that seems likely. Tencent backed the brothers as junior partners, right? So why would Eve go private only to risk Tencent just removing his power? It doesn't seem likely to me. So here's where we're left. AJ probably think their path would lead to a better buyout price, and that by giving them more control, a company that would be better aligned with shareholder value because they believe in their thesis. But that is no sure thing. It could fail. The EU law thing could fail. All that means risk, and that's probably where a Guillemot and Tencent-led deal could earn the shareholders close enough to the returns they want that they are happy to go with the less risky option. And so that is why the stock price went up. Participants in the market are placing a bet. That bet is that Ubisoft may go private. And if it does go private, it will be at a premium compared to the current share price. Say they go private at $22 a share. Well, you could buy in for $11 and find yourself doubling your money. That's the sort of bet that investors could be making. And now the stock's going up simply because of supply and demand. Demand is increased because people think a deal may happen and that deal may earn them money. There'll no doubt be updates to this story soon. And to learn just how too much money and too much growth can hurt a company, take a look at this next. It's the inside story of Blizzard as told by the conflicts within.